the life forms of plants and animals and humans, not necessarily the plants, but I'm going to talk about the animal forms and humans. They're, due to lack of oxygen, the plants, not the plants, but the animals and humans become subject to parasites, bacteria, and viruses, and they gradually start dying off in epidemics. And this is where we are now, because the oxygen has been depleted in the Earth's atmosphere to such a degree now that people are now all deficient in oxygen. We'll talk about this in greater detail when we get to sclerology. And we'll get into the signs in the sclera of the eye which indicate the oxygen deprivation that all of us are now subject to. Now, as the carbon dioxide builds up, we have what is known, and which is now well-known material, on the greenhouse effect. And the oceans on the Earth become warmer, while the glaciers around the oceans start to melt. But what they don't bring out is in the work called The Survival of Civilization by Hamaker. He has pointed out that in the last 20 to 30 years there has been an increase in the northern and southern hemispheres at the polar regions, like in Greenland, where there has been a tremendous increase in glaciation, where the ice pack is increasing tremendously. The winters are getting colder with greater ice pack forming. And even though the seas are melting, the ice around the shoreline, so to speak, the glacial pack is increasing at the higher altitudes. And this glacial pack is coming to the point now where, according to the scientists that understand this, shall we say, this 10,000 year interglacial cycle, and according to all the core drillings that shows the different pollen from different plants at different times, they have predicted that we're moving now toward the next ice age very, very rapidly. And this greenhouse effect that we're into now, with the warming up of the ocean, is a temporary thing for a few years, and then it'll move very quickly into the next glacial period, unless we're capable of remineralizing the Earth properly, which will take the place of this interglacial, shall we say, the glacial cycles where the glacial gravel dust and so on is spread around the Earth to remineralize the Earth. If we can remineralize the Earth as quickly as possible, everything will begin to grow. We'll have a reversal of this increased carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. It will reverse this warming trend, and we'll be able to change all that before the end of this next few years, which will throw us into this glacial period. Now, if we get moved into that glacial period, we're going to have greater problems than ever before with weather cycles, which will be absolutely tumultuous for us. And so one of the things that's going to save us, which will decrease the rapid desertification of the planet, which is part of the greenhouse effect, planting trees rather than tearing down trees, stopping the fossil fuel burning and so on, and this hopefully will bring us to a point where we'll learn to handle our own planet and bring about a period of time where we'll have a beautiful age of proper control of the climate and a period of peace. I don't frankly see that happening yet, because people are still full of bitterness and anger and strife and warfare and justification for revenge and so on. And all that has to come to a screeching halt before we can start turning things around, because man's temperament will make it impossible for bringing the earth back to a pristine purity of trees and gentle rainfall, lack of storms and so on, so that we can grow our own food in peace and harmony. Hopefully we can do that on a limited basis. While the rest of the world is going down in the storm of anger and war and hopefully non-nuclear confrontation. But we'll have to see about that. Now, Doug hit the nail on the head when he says we have to get highly mineralized soil to grow the proper nutrients in the food. Okay? And then we'll be eating what we need to gain the strength that we have to have in order to revitalize and regenerate our own bodies. Now, I hope this makes sense to you. Anita, is there anything you want to add to that? Here.
Just one other thing. There is a direct correlation between the sweetness of the vegetables and fruits and the mineral content. So the sweeter something is, the more minerals you'll have in that substance. And you can, after a while, when you eat things that are grown on highly mineralized soils, they're very tasty and very sweet. The tomatoes are sweet and the lettuce is sweet. And then you go back to the other ones and you can taste the bitterness in it, which is the lack of the minerals there.
If you want to just briefly look at some of the mineral supplements that we do use in the program, I'll preface this by saying that in the 11 years I've been doing this program, I've personally tested and seen literally hundreds of different types of mineral supplements, and I can assure you that at least 95% of them are, as John would say, not worth the powder to blow them up with. They're absolutely worthless. So the vast majority of mineral supplements that are available are absolutely a waste of time. Many of them are actually detrimental to your health. Most of them are simply just ineffective and useless to the body. You might get a very small percentage of mineral supplements that will be effective in a very, very limited sense for somebody who's very mineral deficient, but they won't really work for body electronics beyond a certain point because there's just not enough mineral content in them to really regenerate the body. And it's been my experience that when you're really trying to do something like this type of work that's involving a lot of regeneration of the body, there's a very, very small number of mineral supplements that will be of any value whatsoever. And at this point, there's really only about 3 that we found that we can really recommend, or 3 or 4 that we can really recommend as being of any value whatsoever. Now, the best mineral supplement that we've used, and John was speaking earlier today about those old kelp beds out in near Lake Bonneville in the United States. This is the best mineral supplement I've ever come across, and this is the kind that comes from a company in the United States called Enzymes International. And it's available most of the time over here. People would use it in a capsule form because if you try to get the liquid, it's very, very, it's expensive enough as it is, but if you start to ship the liquid over here, it's even more expensive. So you'd probably be taking it in a capsule form. That would be far and away the best mineral supplement available, but it is quite expensive. It is even in the United States, it's quite expensive, but when you add in the shipping and everything else over here, it becomes quite expensive. Another mineral supplement that we've used just in the last couple of years, not even really that long, maybe about a year and a half or so, which is actually made here in Australia for agricultural purposes, I might add, is a rock dust that comes up from Innisfail, which is up in North Queensland, and it's called Min Plus. And this is absolutely wonderful stuff and costs practically nothing and very, very simple to use. You basically can just take spoonfuls of it and stir it up in a glass of water or juice and just drink it right down. And the wonderful thing about this is, besides the fact that it will do absolutely wonderful things for the body and work marvelously for point holding, is the cost is basically next to nothing. You could probably buy a year's supply for about, I don't know, $7 or $8 or something. Very inexpensive.
One serious problem here that we have to understand are the laws here in Australia. We cannot recommend the Min Plus to anybody for human consumption. It is sold in your stores as a agricultural supplement for plants. we can't stop people from taking something that is a plant material. But nevertheless, we cannot recommend this for human consumption. In fact, many of the different supplementations that cannot be utilized here in Australia, especially mineral supplementations that have a source material called selenium in them, because that's against the law. If people order this outside of Australia, that's their business. But it cannot be sold for human consumption here in Australia. And so this is a problem that we have. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do on this matter. You can do what you choose to do under your own responsibility. Tomorrow, Anita will be going through page 22 on the patient guide and patient directions, and we'll tell you what we do in the Cook Islands. And then you can take that knowledge of what we do in the Cook Islands and then assume personal responsibility for what you do here in Australia. And I think this is only fair. We'll tell you what we're doing, and then you decide what you're going to do from that point. Doug?
Sounds good. So buy some of this stuff for your house plants. And if you happen to spill a little bit down your throat, well, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
I do want to tell you that we do, for those of you that want to experiment with this stuff for your plants or whatever, we do decant it, and by that we put it in a glass jar with water and allow it to settle, and then you pour that off for 3 times. How are you doing? 3 times. Yeah. Doug takes it straight. But it's better if you decant it 3 times into water. Of course, purified water, not chlorine or fluoride water.
This is for your plants, by the way, of course.
Right, this is for your plants. And then the third, water and minerals together, that's the one that you drink. And then the sediment, the sediment from that you can throw on your plants.
Question here. Use the speaker, please.
What do you do with the first 2 lots of water? Are they useful? Do you drink those, or you only drink the third one?
The 2 lots of water, you let them settle out completely.
Yep.
To make sure that all of the non-colloidal material settles out to the bottom. You then pour that off, and then let that settle out again. And then pour that off and let that settle out again.
Thank you.
Okay? Don't waste the stuff in the bottom, because you can put that onto your plants, and as that breaks down, it makes a wonderful plant food. Okay. Now, I promised Corey and Linda that I'd stop at 6 o'clock tonight, with the understanding that we may go a little bit later tomorrow night. But I know that each of you have schedules that you have to meet, and so we're going to end for tonight. I hope that the things that you have personally experienced and saw today makes today extremely worthwhile, and I trust that you will benefit from the information which we have had this day, and also will continue on tomorrow. So thank you all. For those Scotchmen who think they're Irishmen.
I'm part Irish.
So am I. I mean, the Irish people get around.
Yeah.
Okay. Except for thoroughbred Poles. Okay. Now, what we're going to do this morning is take time for a few questions. Now, we had some questions on what we call the tissue salts. And I would like to be fully aware of different types of homeopathic materials. Oftentimes the tissue salts have a homeopathic effect upon the body, which is very, very vital and can have wonderful results. It doesn't change the iris of the eye. It doesn't change the structures of the eye. At least I haven't seen that just by using tissue salts alone, even with a modified good diet. The tissue salts do not have enough of the colloidal minerals, but the tissue salts would be like, for example, like a 3X homeopathic, where you're dealing primarily with energies, and you're really not dealing with the substance of the minerals themselves. You're dealing primarily with the energies of the minerals. Now, therapeutically, if a person has a deficiency of calcium in their body and they take a homeopathic silica or tissue salts in the form of silica, they're going to get a rebuilding of bone tissue. There's no question about that. But you don't see the change in the iris of the eye. Now, what we're concerned about is trying to figure out what will give us the greatest amount of change. Now, let me try to explain something which can really only be understood experientially. You cannot understand this intellectually except only in part. When we inherit from our ancestors through our genes and chromosomes, we inherit their strengths and their weaknesses. When we inherit the conditioned response reactive mechanism from our ancestors, we inherit with that a certain crystalline formation which is found in every single cell of the body. These are what we call the mitochondria within the cells, containing a melanin protein complex, which from a chemical point of view is nearly indestructible. But this melanin protein complex is an organic compound which is primarily your carbon-hydrogen matrix. Now, the melanin material comes from a hormone which is secreted by the pituitary gland. They have found at Stanford University that the only thing which dissolves the melanin protein complex in the human body is the concept of love or enthusiasm or bliss, which only occurs in the emotional body at the first level. Now we go down through the emotional body with suppressed emotionality, beginning with enthusiasm, which due to circumstances of resistance that we all have, we go down to a pain, an emotion of pain, then to the emotion of anger, then down through fear, grief, apathy, and eventually unconsciousness or numbness. Now, in order to reverse this, we have to come back up the same series of emotions that we have suppressed, and we come back up to the level of enthusiasm. Now, at the time we hit enthusiasm, a hormone is secreted from the pineal gland, and that hormone dissolves the melanin protein complex. This is why, when we lovingly and willingly endure the pain that arises from suppressed emotional and physical traumas from the past, when we are able to endure that properly, we come eventually up through the pain, and if the pain level is as described in Book 2 of the Logic and Sequence series, when we get through that pain level, we will feel what we call the burning, searing pain of the Kundalini fire, which will not be stimulated artificially from the outside in. this will be released from the inside out by the human mind learn how to love and to forgive. And therefore, through the concentrated, shall we use the word meditative powers of the human mind, we're able to re-experience those emotions that hold us in bondage. We release that trapped emotionality, come to that state of enthusiasm. We release that hormone from the pineal gland that on a physiological level will then dissolve that melanin protein complex, which is the inherited stimulus response mechanism that holds us in what we can call a reactive bondage, which causes us to feel the way we feel, to react emotionally to external stimuli over which oftentimes we have very little, if any, control. Now, when this happens and we work through the pain of the emotionality, which virtually transmutes all of the associated lower levels of suppressed trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, and so on. When this happens, then we break up this melanin protein complex, which is part of that organic computer chip full of stored reactive memory that we talked about yesterday. When this happens, then the brown, black, and other forms of color of the melanin protein complex represented in the iris of the eye, this gradually dissolves away, and we are no longer bound to that particular reactive pattern. We're free of it. And we have overcome that for ourselves, and morphogenetically we have made it possible for all people that are tied in morphogenetically to us or through the DNA, where all they have to do is to accept, because you, through the point holding, have already gone through the pain sufficiently that other people, all they have to do is to accept, and they change just by the change of thinking, because they don't have that pain tie-in that has been locked in. One person can do it for a full family. And this is what makes this work so exciting, because everyone benefits. Everyone benefits because of the law of grace. We don't have to go back through everything and suffer through every little, shall we say, jot and tittle of everything we've ever done wrong. We don't have to karmically go back and pay the price for everything that we've ever done wrong, because if that be so, we'd be doing this forever. Now, Jesus taught the principle of grace, and by grace are ye saved. The principle of grace is what we are discussing here now, which will employ something that you must understand, so that when it happens to you, it will be fully understood by you and says, ah, now I understand because I'm experiencing it. And that is when you are able to transmute the emotional body properly. It is consumed with a huge burst of violet light or violet flame. And it's just like a flame that consumes you. And when this happens, you feel this enthusiasm, because the enthusiasm has transmuted all of the pain, all of the anger, all of the fear, the grief, the apathy, and the unconsciousness that has held us in reactive bondage. And this is where we get the change of pigment color in the skin, the change in the pigment color in the iris of the eye, and we are now free of the reactive mechanisms of the past that we have taken as a, without question, we feel justified in emoting the way we do. we feel justified in reacting the way we do because we don't know anything other than that because we've always done it. We have been programmed by our genetics to act in a certain way, and we have nothing to compare it to because we haven't ever done anything other than react to the programming which exists within the cells of our own body. Now, when we transmute that, okay, we have transmuted that for everyone that we're tied into on a DNA level. Now, this is exceedingly important to understand. Now, there are several people present. Corey was there. We had Linda was there. Ruth was there. Simon, is Simon here today? Simon was there. He was here yesterday. We had Lil was there. Doug was there, of course. Anita was there, of course. And we had these folks who were present when there were several people from Tanzania in Africa. Now, these people, 3 of them, were what you call this purple royal black skin, which was just as black as you can get that skin. Now, after they went through a lot of pain and the fire of the Kundalini, they've been in body electronics now for some time as a result of Doug's lecturing down in Africa. And they have been involved, well, some of them had been involved for about 2.5 years. And they have, after they have gone through a tremendous amount of burning, searing pain through their body, the skin turned the color many, many shades lighter. I'll say it changed to the color of a dark Polynesian, but certainly not that royal, shall we say, that purple black that you find in Central Africa. Now, there are cases of people who were black to start with, and they have turned white like Caucasian, where you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Now, those of you who are racially biased, of which I have had the pleasure of seeing a lot of people tremendously racially biased here in Africa, or pardon me, Australia. And here in Australia, you have a lot of people who feel very superior, shall we say, genetically to the Aboriginals. We have people who have Aboriginal backgrounds, genetic material, and you can watch their color structures change as they have gone through a tremendous amount of point holding. I think each one of us who have any bigotry left in our systems are going to be terribly ashamed if we perpetuate that by not realizing that there is an eternal, immortal soul existing in that particular body. That soul has been, for those that have the memory of it, they have been yellow, they have been red, they have been black, and they have been white. And we all take our turn at going through the experiences of different levels that we pass through. And when we understand that, people with black skin or yellow skin or red skin, we find out that in past experiences, these people who are different than we are today were our best friends in times past. We've all had common experiences together. And we have to let go of our racial bigotry. And I'll stand on that. Okay? Now, this is a must to take a good close look at. Because a person may be sent, for example, into a black family to transmute the inherited qualities of suppressed pain and conditioned response mechanisms that have held that entire family in bondage. And when they release that particular resisted qualities that lie deeply embedded within every cell of their body. Their skin gets lighter, their eyes get lighter until the eyes turn perfectly blue. Now, I'm not going to get after anybody because they have brown eyes. Anita had black brown eyes. Doug had brown eyes. I had black holes in my eyes from degenerative conditions that I had throughout my body, which have all been pretty well healed up, I think, by now, after 60-some years. Okay? But the thing is, all of us have the need to take a good close look at concepts that are totally in opposition to what has been generally accepted and taught in the university levels. We have to begin to realize that one person can literally be a savior for their entire genetic family. Are you hearing me? One person can be a savior. Now, bottom line, there's a lot of information on this, and we won't have time to go into all of the deep implications of it, but I want you to understand that in the past, the very barbaric past, we had the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which is still perpetuated among some religious cults or organizations. Now, this eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth business was taught in the Old Testament. It was taught by the carryover into the present day. So you have what they call the law of justification. We have moved from the law of justification up to where a person, through their individual meditations and their individual work that they have done in the various organizations of religion where they have perpetuated true principles, they have moved into a process of what we will call the laws of purification. And the laws of purification have brought them to the point where they have been able to overcome their own individual physical body and have moved into a state of enlightenment or self-realization. You have people now who are going through the laws of sanctification, where they're not only paying the price of experiencing pain on the mental level, okay, and the emotional level, and transmuting it to where their entire genetic code, going back many generations and through 12th, 15th, 20th cousins, everyone that they're tied into benefit from the sacrifice of the one. And this is the concept of grace that we're talking about, where we don't have individually to pay for the karmic patterns that we're tied to. We can release those not only for ourselves, but for all of our ancestors and cousins and relatives and so on. And so in this situation, we move into a state of what we call the law of sanctification. So we go from the laws of justification, which used to be an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth bit, up through the concept of purification, which is where a person actually purifies through the universal laws and obedience to those laws and the application of those laws. We come to a point of purification. And now we're moving into the law of sanctification, where we sacrifice through our own efforts that which will benefit the whole. And this is something quite exciting that, frankly, we know a little bit about because we have been there. And you're looking at three people up here who have intellectually experienced it, in the case of Anita, where she has observed it personally, and Doug and myself have done things for what we call the time-space continuum warp, which brings this into active reality, where what we have done, it has been done for humanity. Okay? Now, we're teaching other people how to do this in the advanced courses in what we call visualization and consciousness. And these are the people who have dedicated themselves to service to mankind. So we're not just dealing with hands-on, hold a point type of thing. We're dealing with the spiritual opening that people may develop their intelligence, their capacity to think, their capacity to communicate, their capacity to understand the laws of the universe and to apply them for the common good of all. Now that's quite a statement, but that's the way it is. And some people get very irritated at me when I say that's the way it is. How can you know? We can say we know because we've been there. We've experienced it. It's not an intellectual concept. It's a reality. It's a reality which brings the teachings of Krishna, that brings the teachings of Mohammed, that brings the teachings of Jesus, that brings the teachings of Buddha into proper perspective. And that's the way it is. Now, I hope that this doesn't bother you too much. But some people think they know and they don't know. Some people know because they've experienced it. That's the difference. Now, I hope to, I don't want to pull rank on anybody, but I guess if I have done something and other people haven't, then I'm just saying here is something you can do, what we have done, and we're pointing the way where this can be accomplished by yourselves. Now, with a group of people who have been there to point the way to help you through the problems that all of us have, where there's not one of us here that isn't limited by bondages that we are not even aware of. It's not what we are aware of that bothers us, it's what we're not aware of that is totally suppressed below the level of consciousness that we're not even vaguely aware of because we don't even know that it exists, holding us in a 24-hour-a-day continual state of creativity, keeping us within certain bounds and limitations from which we certainly cannot escape. Now, I hope this answers the other questions that have come up here on brown eyes. I hope this clarifies that in greater detail and shows that we're not here just to change the color of the eye. We're here to release a person from the self-imposed bondage that all of us are subject to, that we might then be free to move on, to be of greatest service to other people in a true, if I can use the word, put whatever word you want into it, but I'm going to use a word with a pure Christian manner of unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness. This is what we are all about. Now, I hope this explains this in detail for some of you that had questions on brown pigmentation in the skin and brown pigmentation in the eye, because virtually this does change. Now, let me bring Corey. Can I put you on the spot, sir? I think you were present when Nimrod from Tanzania, Sama from the Cameroons, and Esther from the Cameroons were there, and you saw what you saw. Would you report to this august body of prospective seers? Would you, would you tell them exactly the way it is, sir? After which Doug Morrison will address you on this subject.
Okay, first of all, Esther, she was a really lovely lady, and I took her eye photos right to begin with, and then we took a second set towards the end of she had her eye photos done, and we took a set towards the end of the course to see what changes she'd had, and she said, "Oh my God, there's a black spot in my eye." Like, she thought that over the 6 weeks she'd developed a serious case of cancer or something. And she said we realized that what had happened is the brown pigmentation had started to lift to actually allow the fibers underneath to start to show through, and so we could actually see this spot which was otherwise invisible before the pigmentation had lifted off. She still had dark brown eyes, but what was really interesting is her skin changed color dramatically. Okay, like, I'm a skeptic. If you say, okay, well, Nimrod, for example, his skin lightened up considerably, but I was saying, yeah, show me a photo of before and after and I'll guarantee you then. Because he'd got quite lighter, but I really couldn't have said definite. But Esther in front of us decided that after John forcing her to do so almost, or encouraging her strongly, she said, okay, I'll do it. And she lifted up her top and showed us. And okay, so let's say that a dark person had a very dark tan up here. You'd understand that because the sun would see this area here. And then you'd expect the stomach might be a bit lighter. Not so on Esther. This was just black. She just had a black face all down the neck and down there towards her bra, and her stomach was like a light tan, like just a brown tan colour. And you could see the change in colour from here to here. It was just very light, right there above. It was just amazing. And then you could see it was light. It was just starting to get really light. No, sorry, I've got that wrong. No, she had an absolutely black stomach. It was Nimrod whose stomach had lightened. His whole lower body lightened up. And his legs and everything. But sorry, no, with Esther, I couldn't work out. Hang on, I made a mistake there. Esther's stomach was black. She had this totally black stomach, and I was surprised because I thought, oh, well, that's just a bit of colour. And then up here, where the sun would be, because she wore a lot of low-necked sort of tops, up there where the sun would usually see was very much lighter than her stomach. And it was just absolutely remarkable. That just said, okay, fine. I said, I do believe that Esther's skin has lightened dramatically, whereas Nimrod's, I was saying, well, it's his stomach. My stomach's white and the rest of me is a bit browner, so it's probably the same with him. But no, and just looking at their eyes changed in colour. It actually lightened up. They had very, very dark eyes, and the pigmentation was starting to lift off. Okay, it takes a while, but it makes me think, like once upon a time I just think, okay, there's brown eyes and there's blue eyes. And really speaking about like the dark eyes, it made me think, well, let's look at it. Why would brown eyes, why would you not be able to see the fibre structure in the same way as blue eyes? Why wouldn't there be brown fibres as well as blue fibres? And it got me thinking and saying, well, of course, because the brown is actually pigmentation on top of the fibres. And so when that lifts off, it brings us back to the fibre structure, which happens to be blue. So it's quite amazing when you really look at it. Anything more you'd like me to say, John?
What else would you like to say, sir?
I wouldn't like to say anything more. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much. Ruth, you were there. Would you like to share your perspective of this? And then Sukara, if there's anything else you'd like to add, I'd like to have you speak on the subject.
I'm not sure what more I can add to what Corey has said.
You can confirm or deny.
Oh, definitely confirm, yes. I mean, Nimrod's change was certainly obvious to me. And he was, and from black, he was a dark coffee colour. It was quite remarkable, and he was absolutely thrilled, just over the moon about it.
Would you like to speak about Nimrod's voice?
Oh, yes. When Nimrod was very, very much younger, in his teens, I think, he had some sort of operation which affected his vocal cords, and he couldn't speak in more than a whisper. And after the point holding, he had his voice back again. He had a lovely, deep, resonant voice, and what's more, he could sing. He hadn't been able to sing
30 years.
For 30 years.
And of course, there was a regeneration of the vocal cords that had been destroyed by the operation. And he, as Ruth has said, he couldn't speak above a whisper. He could force it out like this, but it's still very quiet. And then finally, he could yell, he could make noise, and then he tried to sing, and he could sing beautifully for the first time in years, just like she said.
The return of his voice is particularly frightening, however, since he's a lawyer.
He sang for us his country's national anthem, which was the first time he'd been able to sing for 30 years. Or
at least a length of, probably around 30 years to be exact. I I don't remember, but it's been for most of his life. Thank you, Ruth. Anything more you want to say?
I was just going to say I could confirm that for Esther as well, that her skin definitely did change colour.
Thank you very much. Sakara, you were there, and she was taking all of the camera, taking all this down in camera, so we have a permanent record of it for the instructors seminar. What would you like to add to that?
Well, I don't know if I can add much more detail than what Corey and Ruth have said, but for me it was a really dramatic change. Like Nimrod was really purple-black in the face, and getting it on camera, it was dramatically different. His whole body was so many shades lighter, and that blew me away. And Esther, hers was the same, really. Yeah, I was, I don't know what else I can add for detail, but it was amazing.
Thank you very much. Doug.
I first met Esther about 3.5 years ago when she came to a course I was teaching, and at that time she was a extremely dark brown. The skin was really incredibly dark, and I didn't see Esther again. I stayed in contact with her, but I didn't actually see her again for about 3 years till the middle of last year when I went down to Tanzania. And I remember looking at her and thinking like, well, I think your skin has gotten a little bit lighter, but it wasn't, we didn't have photographs or anything, and she felt like it had gotten a bit lighter too, but it wasn't at that time. It wasn't so obvious that it would have convinced a skeptic. Let's put it that way. I mean, it was probably a bit lighter, but it wasn't so striking that it was, that anybody who saw it would have said, oh yeah, her skin got lighter. She got many shades lighter up at the Genazzano Center just a couple months ago. Many shades lighter. But the most striking skin color change that I've ever seen was this man Nimrod. His name is Nimrod Makono, and he's a lawyer from Tanzania. And he's actually I first met him last June when I went to Tanzania. And at that time, he was a very dark. At that time, he was a very dark brown color, practically black, and he was basically still pretty much that dark when he got to the Genazzano Center at the beginning of January. And what was kind of interesting about this was Esther believed in the concept that the skin color could change. She accepted that idea and believed it. What we found out later was Nimrod, the man who had the most dramatic skin color change, and Sama, who's Esther's cousin, also from the Cameroons. The two of them actually really didn't believe that skin color would change. I mean, they could accept eye color change because they'd seen it, but both of them, sort of privately, just really didn't believe that the skin color could actually change. And as a matter of fact, Sama, what he mentioned after it had already happened, after Nimrod had gone through the dramatic skin color, what Sama mentioned is that he, and what they both confirmed is that they'd been totally skeptical of that possibility. They just couldn't accept that skin color could change. And Sama had actually prayed about it, and what he had asked was, if this is really so, if it's really possible for skin color to change, he didn't ask for it to happen to him. He just said, if it's really possible for it to happen, then let it happen to somebody here. Let it happen, let me see it, was basically what Sama asked. He didn't ask for himself, although his skin changed a bit, but he just said, let me see it. Let it happen to somebody here so that I know that whether this is, true or not. And in Nimrod's case, he had, when he lifted up his shirt there, what you could see were his nipples were still a reasonably dark color, kind of a dark brown. But it wasn't black any longer. But if you looked at the nipples compared to the rest of the skin, it was a huge difference in color. The nipples were kind of a dark brown, and the rest of the skin was basically, as John would say, like a dark Polynesian, or maybe not even a dark Polynesian, a sort of a mid-range Polynesian. It was, you know, what I would call kind of a light brown. But the difference between the nipples and the rest of the skin, it wasn't just like 1 or 2 shades of darkness. I mean, it was like, you know, 15 or 20 shades of darkness. It was a huge, huge, huge difference in coloration between the nipples and the skin. And there was a woman there also from Tanzania who had been Nimrod's massage therapist for quite a few years, and so she was really, really, really familiar with his, you know, with his skin color. And one of the things that she said was that his nipples and his skin had always been, you know, like indistinguishable. They'd always been the exact same color before, basically like a dark, dark brown to black. But she said before, if he had taken his shirt off and you'd looked at him from, you know, 10 feet away, you wouldn't have been able to see the nipples, at least not by color. You know, and you know, they were just absolutely identical color as the skin. And if, you know, for any of you that were there, I mean, you can remember the difference in color between the nipples and the skin. It was not, I mean, it was not even vaguely subtle. It was like, I'd say literally at least 15 shades of, would you agree with that? I mean, it was an absolute striking change. And so what was really exciting for me about this is I've seen skin color change in the past, but it's always been small, slight enough or subtle enough that not just anybody would believe it. I mean, I've believed it, I've seen it, and it's been convincing enough to me, but there's been other people who could sort of look at it and think, well, I don't know, I don't quite remember what it looked like before, or I don't know if it got lighter, you know, that sort of thing. But in Nimrod's change, in his case, the skin color change was just absolutely so dramatic that I don't think anybody who was there could have possibly doubted that skin could change color. I mean, it was just that striking.
I might add that Nimrod went through the severe burning as he was reconstructing his vocal cords. The whole area was literally, as he described it, was on fire. And so was the rest of the body. The whole body was on fire, and this is where we get the changes in the release of this inherited quality, which then releases the person from this reactive bondage. They change. I'd like to see his families and see how his relatives and see what's happened to them. Because I remember if Doug mentioned, I think it was yesterday, about this orthopedic surgeon who went through the all of the movements of the ligaments and so on in Doug's knees at the seminar we had in Maui. Now, he had dark brown eyes, but his eyes did not change. But his father's eyes went from brown to blue. Through all what Bart had gone through, his father's eyes changed just from the work that Bart had done. But Bart's eyes did not change, and I don't think they have changed to this day because he's trying to use his medical knowledge of healing from the outside in and trying to correlate that with healing from the inside out that we do in body electronics. He's been working on that and hasn't got it resolved yet because he won't. You can't heal or even compare healing from the inside out to healing with different types of mechanical electronic equipment from the outside in. You just cannot do that. And there's lots of mechanics out there where they're trying to change consciousness by using different types of electronic mechanical equipment, light, sound, what have you. Now, these do have an effect on the body. There's no question. But it's healing from the outside in. And if the consciousness of the person doesn't change, then all the symptoms that have been temporarily alleviated by these various sound, light, electronic gadgetry, the symptoms will all return again because the consciousness didn't change. And we have mentioned yesterday, which we'll mention again today, to get that consciousness to change, it's an experiential on the inner. The scriptures teach us the kingdom of God is within, not low here or low there. You follow me? The kingdom of God is within. And when we come to a self-realization by releasing the reactive mechanisms which are in the emotional body and go into from the emotional body into the mental body to look at the word patterns that have inwardly created our external environment. At that point of time, we begin to take responsibility for the word patterns that have literally forged our destiny, so to speak. And so those are the things we have to get to, and this is what body electronics teaches us how to do. Where everything else, which is trying to heal from the outside in, it's going at it the wrong way. Now, I hope this will help solve some of the problems, because you have a lot of people with subliminal tapes. You have a lot of people with different types of musical tapes that are beautiful. There's no question about that. They have different tapes that are sound and different things with light, frequency, and whatnot. All of these things have a time, a place, and a purpose. I don't question that. But the thing is we're looking at the inner manifestation and the awareness of that, which has created the outer manifestation that we observe. And so when we are able to change the inner manifestation, then the outer universe for us changes instantly. And a lot of people don't understand that because they haven't been there. Now, we understand that because we've been there. Now, I don't want to pull rank, as I mentioned before, but we know what we're talking about. We've done it experientially. And this is what bonds us together. Even though we might have slight differences on how we do different things, and some people like fresh and raw pizza, you know, type of thing, and some people like to have maybe an anchovy here or there. But the thing is the problem is that we're looking at, we're bonded together because we've had similar experiences, which give us the information on how to bring people to the same state. Now that's why I do request that even though we might have some differences, that you continue to support us as you have yesterday, when Eunice, for example, saw for herself what can be done just by holding a couple of points. Right, Eunice? And she feels a little tired and worn out and washed out, which she certainly would, because when we get the nerve supply and circulation back down through the body, and we're going to be very tired for a few days after a point holding, as the body is regenerating and changing. Now, that's something I think that we all should be aware of. And once again, I want to thank you, Eunice, for your willingness to be a guinea pig yesterday. I'm glad you made it back again today. I sometimes wonder, because oftentimes the person has a point holding, and they don't really do too good for a day or two afterwards, as they're just torn between going somewhere, but they're always worn out and tired. And not always, but sometimes they're quite worn out and tired. And we have to be aware of that. Okay, now I've kind of had a shotgun here with a whole lot of different questions that needed to be answered. I would like to have you think about your questions that you want to ask, and we'll deal with them this morning. And Doug has some things he wants to share.
Just to go back over something here that John had mentioned earlier, the melanin or melanin pigmentation, which is the brown pigmentation that you would find in the eye or that you would find in the skin, is also located throughout the body down at the cellular level. And as John has mentioned, this melanin pigmentation is directly related to inherited stimulus response mechanisms, and it's directly related to suppressed emotionality. And one of the main things that all people will have will be a tremendous amount of suppressed pain in the body. And just an observation that I might make here, in the case of Esther, Sama, and Nimrod, these three African people that we've been mentioning, one of the characteristics that I had found here, which was quite obvious in all three of them when they first started doing body electronics, was it was very, very difficult to get pain in the body. extremely difficult. I mean, I mean, I'm pretty good at finding pain on people, as some of you might know, and I would find it very, very challenging, no matter how hard I pressed and no matter how precisely I'd get on the points, like on the feet and other places in the body. It would be very, very difficult to get any sort of ouch sensation out of these people, because you know, the pain was all suppressed. There was a tremendous amount of numbness or unconsciousness locked into the body. And in Sama's case, he'd been doing body electronics for about 4 years, and he still was at the point when he came to the Genazzano Center where it was still did any of you here hold points on him at all? Anybody here? Simon did his cranial, but it was
Who was with me when we took care of his broken toe? I was trying to illustrate how to take care of an old broken toe that was all crooked, and I put my elbow down on it like this and had him re-experience the broken toe, and it went snap, crack, and he got burning, searing pain down through that broken toe. I didn't intend to work on his broken toe. I was trying to show, here's how you handle this particular broken toe that was sticking out at the wrong direction. And just trying to illustrate, here's how you handle this, to illustrate the pain involved. And it went crack and went back into place. And then the other person I showed this to then began to work it all out. But he had burning quite severely at that point.
What I was going to mention here is that particularly in Sama and Nimrod's case, it was very, very difficult to get any pain out of the body. I mean, you really, really it was a real challenge to get much pain in them. And this I would attribute directly to the tremendous amount of suppressed trauma that's locked in there, probably the majority of which would be on a genetic level. And what was quite interesting was that for both of these individuals, and Esther as well, after they'd gone through a lot of the burning, searing pain in the body, and after you'd seen the significant lightening up in the skin color, which would show that you know, John mentioned earlier again that the melanin pigmentation will actually dissolve or disappear when you have a specific hormone from the pineal gland, which will be activated. And the pineal gland will resonate to the top level of the scale of emotions, which is the level of enthusiasm. And so basically, if you see people who've gone through a lot of burning, searing pain and the skin colors lightened up and the eye colors lightened up, they've made it up to the level of enthusiasm, which is up above the pain level. And so they've unlocked a significant portion of the suppressed pain and other trauma in the body. And one of the things that was very, very obvious with Nimrod and with Sama and with Esther, only after they'd had the lightening of the eyes and the skin, was it then became quite an easy matter to get pain on the body. You could now go down to the foot, you could now go down to a toe or any old point, and you would be able to get pain on them with a sort of an amount of pressure that it would be equivalent to what you'd use on anybody else to get pain. And this was very, very striking for me, particularly with Sama, because I'd been working with him for a couple of years, and I knew how difficult it was to get even a smidgen of pain out of his body in previous years.
In Esther's situation, she had one of these lower backs where her buttocks stuck clear out, and she had what they call a lordosis, or quite a curve in the lower part of the spine, which the people consider to be very beautiful among the black people. You know, this is considered to be something desirable to have because it shows off the buttocks and it's very beautiful. Well, I told her about this problem that she was having in the lower back, and we found the pain, and I leaned my elbow down into that area, which we show in body electronics how to correct all kinds of lordosis or kyphosis or scoliosis or whatever back problems you have. I got to talk about another matter there on that in a moment. But in her case, I leaned into that, and she burned, and she burned, and she burned, and she burned, and her lower back straightened out. This is genetic, because everyone in that part of the country where she was from has this particular lower back lordosis. And it's a genetic quality of the black people in that area. Well, that was over and ended. She no longer had that, and her back was just as straight as anybody else. That is when we got the skin color change. But she went through this terrible burning that consumed her whole body. It was just burning and searing pain through the whole body as her back literally changed. Any comments?
John, what is the difference between the melanin protein complex, which is a genetically inherited mechanism, and the lesion in the eye?
The lesion in the eye?
The genetically inherited lesion.
Like
open lesion.
Like where the fibers are opened,
yep.
and you can see down into the pigment layer?
Yes.
The pigment layer is like a printer's ink, which is a deep purple. This is entirely a different concept. And that is in the back of everyone's eye, whether they're brown or blue. Okay? Now that hole, the hole between the fibers is not pigmented with that melanin protein complex. Are you with me? And so there's a difference between this pigmented spot in the far back portion of the iris of the eye, which they call the stroma. It's actually the posterior pigment layer in the actually in the back part of the iris, not the retina, but the iris of the eye, which is the part that you see, and that pigmented portion there is a kind of a deep printer's ink, purple type of thing. And when the light shines through the fiber structures, and that reflects out, and you see the blue eye. With a brown anterior, what they call the chromatophores in front of the eye, that keeps a person from seeing that blue color reflected out from the light going down through the fibers.
Are they both caused by a genetically inherited response mechanism?
Yes, but they're different patterns of thought. One is the suppressed traumas emotionally.
That's the lesions.
No, that's the brown pigmentation, or black or gold, or what other pigmentations are there. All colors are melanin pigmentation that are not the blue. Okay, the other will be thought forms, which will be tied into the emotionality that hasn't been uncovered yet. But it is a genetic thought form which comes from the mental body and then filters down through the emotional and physical body. Now, when that thought form changes, and if you remember on the very first week of the course, we had that one lady with that closed lesion in the heart area, and when she went through that genetic weakness of the heart, which the whole family had, that deep closed, shall we say, that closed lesion, which went clear down in the pigment layer, completely healed up. But here's where the thought patterns were tied in to the emotionality. Okay? Doug.
So would it be correct then to say that the brown pigmentation in the eye would be related to emotional resistance or suppressed emotional trauma? A closed lesion, which would also represent an inherited situation, would very definitely involve resistance from the level of the mental body, in particular patterns of judgment. And if that's the case, then it would be possible for somebody to go back through the, like say the Kundalini, go back through the burning, searing pain on the emotional body and get eye color change. In other words, get the brown to start to disappear without actually hitting the mental body.
That is correct.
But it would be absolutely impossible to get a closed lesion to open up without uncovering the thought pattern on the mental body level.
That is correct. And just because you go through the fire of the Kundalini, that is thought is the end result of, shall we say, meditation. That is just the beginning, because the fire of the Kundalini only transmutes the emotional body. It doesn't get to the mental body. And you have a lot of people, again, using all kinds of mechanical and electronic devices to try to change consciousness. And it's like it's like a little boy trying to build a sandcastle on the beach to stop the tidal surge in a tsunami from occurring. It's just absolutely useless. And what we're looking at here is after we go through this, thank you very much, Linda, is after we go through the transmutation of the emotional body, that is just the beginning of what we have to go through. We have to go through a series, Doug, we have to go through a series of encompassments of the dualities that exist on the mental body level that we'll talk about later, 2 weeks from now, when we get into the body electronics part of it. And we have to learn how to encompass the dualities, which gets into the vibration of regeneration that we haven't even talked about yet, and then moves very directly after a period of extreme soul searching and self-realization to realize what we have created for ourselves, and we've let go of our judgments, which results in criticisms and condemnation of other people, and we have to let go of all that. And when we can let go of all that, then we can slowly take responsibility for what thought patterns we have created, and we will then begin to realize what the Savior has taught when he said, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." And this is the key to the whole thing. It's the thought patterns that we have to eliminate. And then we move slowly back to the time-space continuum warp, which then rends what we call the etheric web, which ties all people together through what we call the collective consciousness. But as long as we have any form of mental resistance, then this binds us to a point where we cannot enter into that sacred holy of holies, which is represented in ancient literature, which is the inner sanctum from which all thought originates. Okay? And then we begin to realize exactly who we are and how we are one with the Father or one with God. Because we then understand the power of the human mind and how it is related to all other human minds, all other life forms and their intelligence throughout the entire universe. And then we begin to understand the true nature of God. Now, this is the way it is, okay? Because this is what we take people through, what they begin to realize, and the outer universe around the person then begins to go through a dramatic change just by learning to change the thought of the individual. Because we are all one, and we verbalize this statement, and it's a very glib little phrase that we slip off the end of our tongue quite dramatically and fluently, that we are all one. But the truth of the matter is we don't realize that we are all one until we can experience it. And this is the hard part. And this is oftentimes the difficult part. And it sometimes takes several years of dedicated effort to come to that point of self-realization. Anita, I don't want to dog the whole time here. Anything you want to share? Doug, are you sure? Yes, sir?
Going back to changes in the iris of the eye, then, would it be if you saw any type of actual change in iris fiber structure, like for example, you have a closed lesion and you start to have iris fibers moving up from the back into it, is that possible without hitting the mental body, or is any fiber change going to mean that there's been changes at the mental level?
The fibers in the iris of the eye are the only part of the central nervous system which is observable from without. So when you're looking at the fibers of the eye, you're actually looking at the central nervous system. The central nervous system will be part of the outer expression of the inner essence. Okay. So we truly cannot change the structure of the iris of the eye in the structure of it, not the color. The color changes with the emotional release. The structures change with the thought patterns that change. And as the thought patterns change mentally, the entire universe changes for the person. Excuse me. Gesundheit and all those good words. So this I hope will help you understand this. There's so much that can be discussed here, because if we truly understood how the human mind works, you can hold one thought pattern in a state of continual creation, and the person's physical body and their outer environment can go through a very, very radical and immediate change. Now, without going into details on this, I'm sure Doug has seen this happen. And we can demonstrate that for you, but we're not going to. We usually save those things for the instructor seminars so that people can understand that they can learn to do these things also, rather than getting spooked out by things that they don't understand. These are things that we must learn individually, that the outer world around us is the outer expression of the internal consciousness of the individual. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? This is your chance to ask questions, folks. Please do so. Doug, would you answer the question, please? I'm going to blow a nose.
I just wanted to say that I was mentioning to Anita yesterday, many years ago I was doing a lot of muscle testing, and I used to do a chart on people, so I was muscle testing and ticking off this chart, which happened to be of the mouth, and I was checking for amalgam fillings, because in those days we were sort of doing sequence for taking out the amalgam fillings. And I tested this teenage girl for her amalgam fillings. When I finished and I said something about the amalgam fillings, she said, "I don't have any." And so we went out into the waiting room, and her mother was there, and her mother had the fillings. So all these things that you're saying now this morning, that's sort of clearing in my head how this accumulation and this genetic factor comes through. So even if the amalgam fillings are showing up in the next generation, there's a lot to get rid of there.
So you actually were testing her, and according to your testing, she should have had amalgam fillings in specific teeth. And her mother had the fillings in those exact teeth. Is that what you're saying?
John also has a case. I don't know the specifics of it, but I wasn't with him then. But there is a child born with a tattoo that the mother had on its body. Do you have more details on it?
The mother lived in Lahaina in the island of Maui in Hawaii. And this lady had this tattoo on her rump, okay? And she had it well hidden, but she had this tattoo with several different colors in it, in this one particular tattoo. And it was a little, as I recall correctly, it was kind of like a little cupid on there. Her baby was born with exactly the same tattoo in the same position on the rump. I thought, my goodness sakes alive. Yeah, I asked the mother when she got the tattoo, and she had the tattoo when she was pregnant. And so whatever happened at the time, that tattoos can be quite painful, so when that tattoo took place, it was passed right down genetically to the daughter in the formation that she was going through at that time. So I think that was quite interesting. Excuse me just a moment. Corey, is Corey back there? Corey, is the break time? Are they set up for that? About 5 minutes. Okay, question here. Speak up before the mic, please. Speak loudly.
All right. You talk about the Kundalini and the heat, and I've heard some things about combustion with this Kundalini. What's the heat, and how come some people can combust?
You read my book 3, and that is alluded to very definitely on how that takes place. Okay? But don't read that until you get book 1 out of the way, and then book 2 out of the way. That'll test you to the limit, and then book 3 will test you to the limit again. Okay? But that's explained in that particular material. This is some of the most important material you can ever read. Yes, sir.
John, I'd like to ask you a question about our soul or spirit. Would it be right to say that our soul or spirit is like the end of a ray of light from the great force, or God, or whatever we want to call it, and by that way we are all connected? You were talking before. Would that sort of idea work in with what you're saying?
Let's look at it this way. If I take a colander, you know what a colander is? You wash a whole lot of fruit or something, you put it in a colander, and the water goes through the little holes. If I take that colander and put that over a light bulb, I have light rays going out in all directions from that light bulb through the little holes in the colander. Each one of us is one of those little rays of light.
Right.
And so we're all tied into the same central source of that light. And there's what we can call a universal life force, which in Reiki, those people trained in Reiki are able to feel that life force moving through them to help to create a balance in an individual who's deficient in life force through their own violation of natural laws. Okay?
Good. Thanks, John.
Now, basically, all of us are tied into that one source. Now, you can call it the Spirit of God. Okay? You can call that the Holy Spirit. It doesn't matter what name you hang on it. It is still the one force that enlightens the mind and gives warmth to the heart. And we're all tied into that same source, regardless of how we call it. But when we violate the laws of the universe, or what we can call the laws of God, and begin to have resistances to the experiences of life, or lack of gratitude for the experiences of life in any form, then we block off that Spirit of God, we block off that universal life force, and our body begins to degenerate and decay. The moment that we let go of our grudges, the moment that we let go of our hatreds and our resistances, then immediately we will feel this pulsing of energy coming through us. It's something you can feel. And that universal life force, or what we can call the Spirit of God, then enlightens and activates the body, and the person then begins to return to its natural DNA considerations and the energy overlays, which are the distortions to that, which are built upon the resistances, the judgments, the criticisms, the condemnations. When those are all removed, then the body starts going through its natural healing. Do you approve, sir? Okay. So does God. All right. Yes.
Yeah, I've been having a few problems with not the concept of the skin change. I mean, I accept and believe that it's possible and that it happened, and I understand as much of the sort of physiology and so on that you've explained, but I'm having a real problem at an emotional level, being in a room with a whole room full of white people, and I'm sort of feeling like what we're saying is, well, black men change your skin colour and all your problems are going to be relieved. So at an intellectual level, I've understood this statement to say that the change of skin colour was a movement in their emotional reality, and Doug mentioned that they had the capacity to feel pain afterwards, and you even mentioned that genetically you felt that the holding of the pain was very much at a genetic level in the blacks, which I could understand from the history point of view and so on. So what do? I'm feeling like a racist myself in that sense. Like, I mean, I don't mind black people's skin colour. Are you saying that everybody has to be white on this planet, and that's when we'll have emotional peace and mental, constant mental relationship with God, that we'll all be white?
May I say this gently and very kindly? When we understand that the resistance that we hold ever present in our mind and in the structures of our body in a crystallization form, this is being emanated out into the universe around us 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So anything that is less than love will begin to crystallize within our own physical body, but also will manifest throughout the entire universe. And so we have all of this pain that is locked genetically within the structures of our body, of all kinds of pain, all kinds of anger, all kinds of fear, grief, and so on. All of this is crystallized in our physical body, but when we understand it's also crystallized in the universe around us and is being created 24 hours a day. Now, we can go out here and affirm all we want, but we cannot affirm or decree or meditate or visualize in an area where at the same time we are suppressing it within our bodies, which is on 24-hour call. Okay? And so these energies of hatred we are generating in the universe around us 24 hours a day, even though we are not aware of it because it's an unconscious consideration. And so all of us, as long as we have crystallizations left in our body, these are not only affecting our physical body and shutting off what we call the Spirit of God, or shutting off this universal life force, okay? But it's also creating blockages out in the environment. It's creating blockages in Mother Earth, who is where our bodies are of the dust of the earth, and how we actually deal with the dust of our own body, so to speak. It actually reflects right down into the earth itself. You understand that concept? Okay, so we cannot visualize in an area that at the same time we're suppressing because we can't remember it. The pain suppresses the memory where we can't experience that area of life. And therefore that area of life that we cannot experience on the mental level because the pain blocks it off, that pain that we're holding there is held in a constant state of manifestation and creation, and the entire universe will experience it. And therefore we will continue to have wars. We will continue to have disease. We will continue to have bigotry and lack of understanding between each other until we can let go of that which separates us rather than unifies us. Therefore, anything that exists within us which is less than love will separate us. And we will not have that oneness. Now, when we understand that, every one of us should be hurting inside, because we will realize that all of us have a certain darkness of mind, if we want to be honest with ourselves, which would keep us separated from other people. Now, this is wherein we're dealing with the principles. The effects of it simply will be found in the melanin protein complex. We're not turning everybody white and blue-eyed, okay? People are releasing the hatred, the anger within their physical structures that they have inherited from their ancestors. The soul, for whatever reason, has come into this particular body for the lessons that it needs to learn in this round of activity, okay? And therefore it brings with the soul, brings with all of its experience that is overlaid energetically on top of the energy field of our body, and we add insult to the injury. And the only thing that's going to eventually undo this mess that we're in, which is the end result of our own creative efforts mentally that we have suppressed, the only way we can do that is learning how to love unconditionally, learning how to forgive unconditionally, and bring about a state of emergence, of self-realization within us, of lovingly and willingly enduring with gratitude every single experience of life. Now, the first thing that some people in their limited thinking will call, they're going to say, well, you're a racist if you put forth the idea that the eye color changes. You're a racist if you actually say that the skin color changes. The truth of the matter is we're exactly the opposite of a racist, because we look upon the oneness of the entire human race. And we're looking at everyone with the same degree of impartiality and discernment that we are all one. Now, if people want to call us racist, they do it only out of their own ignorance and lack of knowledge. When they come to understand the concepts that we're putting forth the idea of the oneness of the human race and the eternity of the soul. And when we get that all under control, yes, when we have love, yes, these things will all change. And it doesn't matter whether you're black or whether you're red or whether you're white or whether you're, what else is there? Brown. When all these things come about with this understanding, then everything will change. We could talk about that for quite a long time. Are you ready back there? Well, let's just talk about that during break time. You save your questions, and you have your little cuppa, but you enjoy that. Does this help you? Okay? But it's a good question. We are all one. Oh, excuse me. Linda?
Just a couple of
let's take one thing at a time. Now, bring out all your questions now, and we'll discuss those and get those completely out of the way so that the slate's clear. Anita, we'll have you first. Anita has some things she wants to say.
I want to talk about blue eyes and brown eyes. Since I'm a brown-eyed person going to green at the moment and hopefully to blue in the future. I think it'll be 5. But anyway, as I release these crystals, these emotional resistances from my body, I am not only doing them for myself, but I am doing it for all of you too. And I don't think we should look at people as a negative or a positive, a blue-eyed person as a positive or a brown-eyed person as a negative. I see everything that it is. The person is blue-eyed, the person is brown-eyed, but it's not a judgment of negative or positive. Now, I have had memories where in a past life I was black And I'm sure the people in this room, you have also been black. You have also been Chinese. You have also been Arab. We've had many past lives. Sorry for people who don't believe in reincarnation.
I knew her when she was black. She was absolutely these beautiful Ethiopian, you know, where you have the long neck and the graceful, slim body. I knew her, and we have both the similar, complete memories of this particular experience, where I was a Roman and she was had been an Ethiopian slave.
I met a guy who told me he didn't believe in past lives, and in fact, he hadn't believed in past lives in his previous 6 lifetimes either.
But what I'm saying is that past life was also a part of me, and I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to not love it either. I mean, there was a time where I had more resistances than I do this day. And I'm sure there was a time when you have had more resistances than you do this day, and in the future maybe you'll have less. And so we are where we are, and I don't think we should make a judgment when we see a black-eyed person, well, that's a negative thing, you know. We are where we are at that moment in time, and we're all releasing things for everyone else. As John has said, we are all one. So there's a part of me that is a part of you. Yes, Simon.
Could I interrupt for a moment, Anita? I'm just going to do the photocopying, so if anybody hasn't ordered these that wants them, anyone who hasn't put their name down? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Simon. Any questions on that, what I've said so far, from anyone?
Are you doing the melanin too, Simon? Can you do one extra one for me? I seem to have misplaced mine again.
Make sure it's ripe, a nice ripe cold one. Oh, what are you after?
I missed that the first time, thankfully.
Okay. We're all progressing toward a greater love, a greater harmony with our higher self. And this progression, we are in different forms as we are progressing through that. And I don't look at people as negative or positive. I just see them as they are, and we're all working through our stuff.
The question that we had before the break was a very good one, and well, the question was basically she got up and was basically saying she was, on the one hand, could hear the information about eyes and skin color change and accept it intellectually, but that it was difficult to sort of not feel a bit racist or a bit bigoted about it and so forth. And I can relate to that, because I know when I first heard a lot of this stuff back a while ago, that it is difficult to hear this without having certain emotional responses come up. And I just wanted to kind of point out a couple of things here. The main thing to realize here ultimately is that if we're telling you that skin can change color and eyes can change color and so forth, the best thing to consider right from the start is this: all we're doing is reporting the news. We're not saying this is how things ought to be or how we wish things should be or any of that. We're just saying this is how things are. So the thing to realize is, however any of us respond to this concept emotionally, it doesn't change the fact that it is what actually happens. I mean, you can read, if I get up here and tell you that, brown eyes will get lighter in color and go towards blue, or that skin can even change color and get lighter, regardless of whatever anybody wants to read into that, whatever agenda anybody wants to tack onto it, or whatever, reaction anybody has to it, it has no effect on the truth or falsity of the information. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, in other words, it either happens or it doesn't happen. And obviously, you folks here, and for most of you, this is probably somewhat of a new concept. You can say, well, yeah, I believe this is possible, or no, I don't believe it's possible, or there's always the third alternative. You can just put it on the shelf until you're actually in a position to know for yourself. But bottom line, whatever your emotional response to this is, and even whether you choose to believe it or not, none of these things has any effect whatsoever on whether it's actually true or not. Do you see what I'm saying? So just take it from the start as this is what happens. And if you have a hard time believing that, then that's fine. Don't just accept it because we tell you. But what I would recommend you do is put it on the shelf, as John said yesterday. Just wait and see. Don't take the position in your own mind, there's no way eyes change color, there's no way skin changes color. Because obviously the fact that you haven't seen it or haven't heard about it really has little bearing on whether or not it's possible. So if you have a hard time accepting it, do yourself a favor. I mean, frankly, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me whether you believe it or not. I mean, that's really your decision or your choice there. But I'm just saying, do yourself the favor of putting it on the shelf until you're in a position to really see for yourself one way or another if you're having trouble swallowing the idea. Question? Come up to the mic so we can get you on tape.
On people who have two different coloured eyes all the time. My mother tells me I was born with two different coloured eyes. I have a brown eye and a green eye.
If you look at the human body, one of the things that you'll find is that the left side of the body, to a certain extent, will relate to the yin or to the feminine in life, and the right side, to a large extent, will relate to the yang or to the masculine. If you have a very obvious difference in eye color from one eye to the other, like for example, which eye is darker? Which is the brown eye and which is the green eye? Okay. Well, let's say for the sake of argument that you had a brown right eye and a green left eye. The fact that the right eye was darker than the left eye would indicate that most likely you had a greater amount of resistance towards yang energies in life, towards male figures, towards masculine energies. You would have if there's that much of a swing between the two eyes that one would say they're different colors, then whichever eye is darker, you would have a greater amount of resistance in that area of life. So that would be one thing you could look at there.
Okay. I'm fully trained in all forms of manipulation therapy, like a chiropractic physician. Their type of manipulation would be chiropractic adjustments. It's very similar to naturopathic manipulation, where in the States we're fully trained in manipulation therapy, which is a little gentler technique than what the chiropractors use. Okay? We find that many people have one eye which is brown, one eye which is blue. We find that oftentimes there is a blockage in nerve supply to the right side of the body or to the left. And let's say that it's to the right side of the body, then oftentimes the right iris will turn brown. Now, when the person is taken back through body electronics, back to the trauma, that could be a birth trauma, or they could have fallen on the side of their head when they fell out of a high chair when they're a kid, okay? When this is corrected, just the mechanical aspect of it, then oftentimes within a short time, both eyes become exactly the same color. So it can be, as Doug has suggested, where it can be a mental thing or it can be a mechanical thing on the physical body level that simply needs to have the nerve supply restored to that part of the body. Okay, but in either case, when these things are straightened out, both eyes will become exactly the same color.
Okay, I wanted to go back to...
I also have a lighter left eye than my right eye. My father had deep, dark brown eyes, and my mother had blue eyes. And I think I have more resistances with my father than my mother, and it shows in my eyes. But it's interesting because the way my eyes are healing, they're healing in these strips. And it's like I'm cleaning up each segment completely as I'm going, and that's how I am in life. I like to have everything perfect, and I like to keep every single little corner clean, and it's like that's the way, in some way, my body is healing too.
She goes from point A to point B. And she says, I'll be ready in 5 minutes. But if there's no emergency situation, by the time she gets from point A to point B, there's been 25 stops along the way, and that place is clean as a whistle between those 2 points.
I wanted to look at something that Anita was talking about earlier here. And I think that one of the reasons why, when you start talking about eye color change and skin color change, I think one of the reasons why it does tend to bring up a lot of emotional responses for all of us, regardless of what, color skin or color eyes we might have right now. I think one of the reasons that it does bring up these responses is because all of us, to a very large degree, are identified with our physical body. So we think of ourselves as, well, I'm white, or I'm blue-eyed, or I'm black, or I'm brown-eyed, or I'm Chinese, or, we think of ourselves as being the horse we're riding, or as being the vehicle that we're occupying. And I think that that's a very limited way of looking at reality. By my way of thinking, none of us have, ultimately, none of us are white or black or brown or yellow or red or any of these things. None of us are brown-eyed or blue-eyed or green-eyed or any of these other things. We're just in a body right now that possesses some of these characteristics. And if you look at 2 different people, like let's say we have one person who's got a light skin, a blue eye with a marvelous constitution, no holes in the fiber structure, just a really, really marvelous constitution. And let's say we've got another individual who's got darker skin, brown eyes, all sorts of fiber deviations in the iris. You could certainly say that there would be very big differences in the level of resistance within those 2 bodies. It would be quite fair to say that the body with the darker skin and the darker eye and the more deviant fiber structure, it'd be quite fair to say that that body was reflecting a much greater level of resistance. But I think it would be a big mistake to try to conclude from that one individual was better or worse than the other, or that one individual was more or less, spiritually evolved than the other. The thing about it is you're going to come into a body that's going to be perfect for you to learn whatever lessons you're trying to learn this time around. And for certain types of lessons, for certain lessons, a really, really healthy body without a lot of physical problems isn't going to work very well for you. If you've got certain lessons and certain resistances to learn, you can't learn those lessons in a body that doesn't break down. You need a body that breaks down all the time to give you the opportunities to learn certain lessons. Some lessons could be best learned in a white body. Some lessons would be much better learned in a darker body. Some lessons would be better learned in a male body. Some lessons would be better learned in a female body. So it's got nothing to do with better or worse here. It's better or worse for what? Better or worse for who? Better or worse for what lessons? Do you see what I'm getting at? So, get rid of all this nonsense about, superior, inferior, better, worse, and just recognize that we're all in different bodies, and each one of those bodies is absolutely perfect for us.
Could you say, Doug, that as you look at every single person out here, that one person might be pumpernickel, another person might be whole grain, somebody else, as far as bread is concerned, and if we're being impartial, could you say that we're all well bred?
I'll let you say that.
Kanan, would you come up, please? I still see that we're all well-bred folks. I just want you to understand that by the very fact that we're here. Now, one of the most important aspects of what we're involved in is the use of words. Now, I want to have Kanan state to you what he stated to me about something that I have said. And I want you to see how quickly we can get ourselves in trouble by not being clear about how we state things. And he caught me on a good one. So Kanan, would you please indicate where you have felt, because of what I have said, that I was in opposition to something that you consider to be true? Now bring it out. This is important.
Yeah, what I pointed out to John in the break was that earlier John was teaching that he was talking about learning to love and learning forgiveness, which is a very Christian attitude. My own spiritual master teaches that you don't need to learn to love, because that is the way we are, and forgiveness comes. In fact, love and forgiveness overflows from us when we drop our barriers and our blocks. So there's no need to learn that. There's no need to worry about that. And that's what I pointed out to John. I found that to be a fundamental difference in teaching.
Now, from my consideration, I see no difference. I see a problem with the understanding of semantics. So what I mentioned back to Kanan is that learning to do something isn't necessarily, it's from my perspective, we learn how to get rid of the negativities within us and the resistances within us, at which time then the ability for us to love comes forward and the ability to forgive comes forward when we let go of our resistances. But from a standpoint of having to learn how to love, if we look at that technically, that would be incorrect. And from a semantic point of view, that would cause problems with people who understand the word learning as different. The way I would look at it is we learn how to apply the laws of God appropriately. We learn how to do that. And thus, by dropping the resistances, we learn how to love. We learn how to forgive, which would have a different meaning to Kanan. So even though when we're talking about words and we have the same understanding, the words, because of our interpretation of words, make it appear that we're diametrically opposed. And this is where we have to sit down and we have to communicate with people carefully, rather than taking, shall we say, offense that we feel they're opposed to us when in reality we're on the same side, but we don't know that. And oftentimes wars are simply fought over different meanings of words. So I have to be very careful to explain what I mean by learning. And I hope I've clarified that now, Kanan, to your understanding, so we're in harmony. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah.
And if we can take this type of a situation with people, realizing that we're all going to be reasonable people, and we can all look past the differences of words, then we realize that we're on the same team. Now, there's other situations where people use the same words with totally different meanings, and you find out when you get down to the understanding of those meanings that you're diametrically opposed in your thinking. So this works both ways. But either way, we should be clear as possible in our verbal communication, so as not to be where it's our responsibility to make sure that we are not misinterpreted by the hearer. Even though we are going to be misinterpreted by the hearer, because each one of us will have a different perspective on the meaning of words, especially if we're from different cultures or taught by different teachers or from different languages, or even from the States to Australia. I find words here will have a different meaning than words in the States. And so this is something we have to look at carefully and resolve these things carefully with due consideration for the people involved. We're all doing the best we can with an improper language that it isn't very clear with each other. So I'm very happy that Kanan brought this up today, because it shows inherently the weaknesses we have within ourselves in our communication. So as you folks progress in body electronics, and you begin teaching, and you begin explaining things, in these areas that are extremely sensitive, we have to learn to express ourselves so there's no misunderstanding and no hard feelings after there has been just a verbal encounter with each other. Because oftentimes we have words that are quite emotionally tinged, okay, which we have been discussing here. And we have to see if we can work through that emotionally charged issue, that we might be in harmony and oneness rather than create more and more separation, which results in sometimes years of anguish until we can get these things resolved with people, especially relatives. You know how you have fighting between family members? It goes on for years and people won't forgive one another. Somebody has to take the bull by the horns and say, hey, what did you really mean back in 1957 when you were talking about this situation with Auntie Sue? Okay, sometimes it takes a while to get through all that stuff. But anyway, Kanan, anything more you want to say, sir?
Only that I think that in this case the words are really important, because it leads to a whole different energy where people are going around trying to be loving and forgiving, rather than just being selfish and going into themselves and being what they really are.
That's really good. Thank you very much,
Thank
Kanan.
you.
Okay. I'm going to have to get something else out of my mind too, because I'm trying to use an association with Kanan's new name. That's new to me. I think of him as Conan the Barbarian, and and I try to do that by association, and I don't think that fits very well, because the man's very, very gentle. He's not a barbarian, but you know, even the words and the associations we have sometimes becomes unacceptable. Anyway, is Corey here? Is Corey here? Okay, is Corey here? Okay. Alan, could you do me the favor of bringing your wife up here and 2 chairs? You might let her walk up here and just bring the 2 chairs. Okay. No, we're just line up along here. We're going to be fine. Kate, would you like to look into bright lights for a while? Okay. Now, we'll just scoot down this way. And Doug, could you scoot down that way? We'll bring the guests of honor right here in front. Kate? And now I'd like to introduce to you 2 very wonderful people that we have known now for some time, Kate and Alan Meyer. Now, Kate is the president of AGM Fermented Foods. Alan is the chief cook and bottle washer of the laboratory that he operates. And I wish to say this, and I believe it. I'm going to ask Alan to repeat to me what he said to me. Alan, could you take that little microphone there and plug that in front of your mustache? And pardon me, we joke with each other here. But I asked him, I said, Alan, do you really know anybody who knows as much as you do about fermented foods. And what did you tell me, sir?
I hadn't met him yet.
Okay, and I believe after looking into the matter and having studied the concepts of Acidophilus for most, a good portion of my life, I believe that Alan can be considered to be the world authority on fermented foods and Acidophilus. I think that that is fair. Kate, would you agree with that? And he's traveled the world, and he consults with all the large companies on fermenting processes. And when they get into a problem, they hunt this gentleman down. So it's a pleasure to have him here. And if I joke a little bit here and there, it's not because I don't have respect. It's because I have respect and for this gentleman and his wife, and we've had some wonderful times together. Now, we're going to go into the material here. Where's Anita? Okay, we're going to take time and lay some very heavy groundwork. Doug, would you go over very carefully on page 32 here, the 12 points on Acidophilus? This is what we have put out for a number of years, and I've looked at it the other day, and I wouldn't change a thing. This material here we've researched out, and we know that for the body, we need Acidophilus in the intestinal tract in order to synthesize properly the various vitamins and to help with the entire digestive process that we're going to go in with you a step at a time. So I want you to get this information down. A lot of people take this information for granted, but this is one of the major secrets behind getting well for any type of disease process. And we're going to take this a step at a time. And Doug, if you'd be kind enough to go through that carefully a step at a time. I would invite Kate to say what she wants to say, Alan to say what he wants to say, and for you to ask questions as we move along. So Doug, if you just take charge here and go with it.
Okay, this is page 32 in the patient guide. 12 points on Lactobacillus acidophilus. Number 1, Lactobacillus bacteria are a group of aerobic, long, slender rods which produce large amounts of lactic acid in the fermentation of carbohydrates. Number 2,
I want you to make notation here that lactic acid is one key that I want you to remember clearly. Carbohydrates is what the Acidophilus lives on, and it can only exist in an aerobic environment. That's why Acidophilus here is aerobic in nature. And as you take some of these comments and separate those, we'll discuss this in detail as we move on into the discussion here with Alan and Kate. Go ahead, sir.
Number 2, daily dietary intake of Lactobacillus acidophilus helps to maintain proper balance of healthy bacteria in the intestinal tract. Some problems from lack of healthy bacteria in the intestinal tract due to the proliferation of unhealthy bacteria are constipation, irritated colon, and diarrhea. Acne, eczema, and fever blisters may also be caused by unhealthy bacteria. Now, one thing that Alan and Kate will be going into in much greater detail is that there are a larger number of different beneficial bacteria than just the Lactobacillus acidophilus. There are a great number of different bacteria, each of which would be in a healthy gut, would be present at different places along the intestines, and that's something that I'll leave to the experts here. But you want to take this information that John has, which is primarily looking at one particular type of Lactobacillus, the Acidophilus, and you want to kind of expand this, and particularly in light of what these folks are going to share a bit later, to encompass a broader range of different healthy bacteria in the intestines. Okay. Number 3, Lactobacillus acidophilus is essential to help synthesize and assimilate necessary vitamins in the intestinal tract. one thing that's very important for people to understand is that there's a lot when your system is working properly, and if you look at the whole process of digestion and assimilation, there's a lot of things that go on inside the body that when things are working properly. There's a lot of things that go on inside the body that your body is not actually doing itself. It's actually dependent upon the different types of friendly microorganisms that would be within the intestinal tract to perform certain things. And really, I would say it would be fair to describe it as a symbiotic relationship. I mean, we're giving them a place to live, and they're helping us with certain of our little problems here and there. So it's a win-win situation there. Number 4, Lactobacillus acidophilus has been found to help lower cholesterol levels in the bloodstream. Number 5, Lactobacillus acidophilus has been known to help detoxify toxic and hazardous material found in the diet. Number 6, Lactobacillus acidophilus aid in producing enzymes which help the digestibility of food. And this is something that Alan will be talking about in a few minutes, where he'll talk about the production of enzymes within a number of the different products that he's making. And this is really quite exciting for us here because, as we made perfectly clear yesterday, we're into enzymes. Number 7, Lactobacillus acidophilus improves the digestibility of feed for animals and has been tested and used as a feed additive. And I'm sure Alan's going to probably get into racehorses, and if you get on his good side, he might even tell you who to bet on. Number 8, Lactobacillus acidophilus helps maintain the pH level of the intestine by producing lactic acid from carbohydrates, thus preventing an increase of pH, which could then allow the proliferation of sensitive microbes, which could produce various toxic substances harmful to the health of the body. It's been my understanding, and I'm sure Alan will maybe expand upon this a little bit, but it's been my understanding that if you look at the beneficial bacteria in the gut, on the one hand, what they're doing is they're producing lactic acid from the fermentation of carbohydrates, and one of the things that it's kind of like what they're doing by producing the lactic acid is they're helping to regulate the pH within the intestines, which is actually very much to their benefit because they can only exist and thrive in certain pHs. So one of the things that they're actually doing is creating an environment that's quite optimum for their survival. And of course, it's also an optimum environment. If it's good for them, it's good for us, basically.
The lactic acid that the lactobacillus produces, first and foremost.
Point this way, sir.
Right. Right. How's
There.
that? Can everybody hear me? Kath told me I'm mumble. Especially when I asked her to marry me. The bacteria produce the lactic acid as their first line of defense. That's their first cover. It's to exclude all competing bacteria or putrefactive bacteria, because they can't live in that low pH where they can. Now they also produce a penicillin, a personal penicillin, like Acidophilus produces acidophilus or Bulgaricus is bulgaricin, and they'll use this on each other because they can't use lactic acid on each other. So if they come across and have to compete for food, and like milk, for instance, where Lactobacillus bulgaricus is really the only bacteria or lactobacillus that will ferment milk, it's got the perfect food. What am I going to do with all these other guys? They want to
recommend to the test. And we have found one Acidophilus that will work better than any other Acidophilus we have found. It'll make yogurt. And we've had wonderful results with it over the years. But in some cases, we've had problems where people, like with psoriasis, they haven't, whatever has happened, for people under tremendous stress, the Acidophilus hasn't worked. And so we sent it to Alan to have him test it out, and he said that this will form a colony of Acidophilus in the gut in about 4 days. And it took him 4 days to establish a good colony of Acidophilus from the capsules of Acidophilus that we have been using. Yet he said, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, this was the best Acidophilus that he has found outside of that which he manufactures himself. Is that correct, sir? So we were on the right track. But we had missed the boat because this Acidophilus, when taken internally, okay, this particular Acidophilus gives you a full culture immediately upon taking it. And you don't have to wait for 4 days for the Acidophilus to form in the gut. Now, if a person is under stress, are you aware that stress will destroy the Acidophilus in the system? Just the stress that a person is under will destroy the Acidophilus. And therefore, people who are under severe stress will have to take extra Acidophilus in the body in order to correct these conditions, that the body might digest the food, or else there's no nutritional value in the food that we eat, which is dependent upon the Acidophilus. And so for people who have different problems like eczema or candida, thrush, what have you, they won't get better with the Acidophilus we have been using, because it takes too long to form a culture, and because of the stress factors people are under, those people that are under marital stress or economic stress or stress from their job or one thing or another. I mean, we've got terrible problems that people are going through, and the stress destroys the Acidophilus before it can even get established. This will help to solve that particular problem, and will also be better than any Acidophilus we have been able to acquire up till this time. And so I want to just state this. This is the best you can get that we are aware of at this time. Okay? I want you to look at it now. The bottom part here, Alan, if you go through that again, you've got the Acidophilus. Now the question is the Acidophilus all the way through this in layers or only in the bottom?
No, he's a bottom fermenter. He's sitting down here in the bottom. And fermenti, with Lactobacillus fermenti, is on the top. And Bulgaricus is about the halfway down the bottle, you know, obviously. But that's the way they ferment.
Now would you go over that again, please, and hold that up so everyone can see it. Kate, maybe you can help them on that.
Yeah. The Acidophilus is a bottom fermenter. It's always on the bottom, and Lactobacillus fermenti, which is a top fermenter, he's on the top, right? And he's a big producer of lactic acid and a little bit of alcohol, very potent alcohol, but it's only very, very small. It's not even, don't even worry about it. But it's more as a protection for the rest. And then you have Bulgaricus is about halfway, and then you have Casei, which is Lactobacillus casei, which is a really good Lactobacillus. Every bit as good, in my opinion, as Acidophilus. And he's in between. But there's 9 in there, in different areas. So that's what we say. Always just gently bring him up the bottom. You can see it on the bottom. Just bring it up gently. And make sure it's cold when you do this, because it gets very, very gassy. And when you take the top off, take it very slowly off.
One person said the other day, why is it you lose half the bottle when you take the cap off?
Well, he opened it too quickly. There's another point that, just to add to what John was saying about the loss of Acidophilus. In here I put in this, digress from Lactobacillus for a moment. There's 2 yeasts that I use, and these 2 yeasts are the most beneficial yeasts there are to man. There's no better. They are Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Saccharomyces boulardii. Now, in the medical journal, the Australian Medical Journal come out last month, they all talk about Saccharomyces boulardii and how doctors should be using it against dysentery and gastric and all that sort of thing, because it's such a good yeast. And it will attack all these putrefactive bacteria that can get in our system. Now, the only reason I put them in there is because the Acidophilus needs vitamin B1 as a growth factor. Even though that the Acidophilus produces its own B1, it's not one that can use as a growth factor. It needs to get that from the yeast. So that's why I put it in there, right? Now, what happens under stress, is that as soon as you're under stress, you use up all that vitamin B1. That's the first one to go. And you just starve the bacteria. And I don't like that.
Did everyone get
they're
that?
They're my friends, you know, so you look after them.
Did everybody get that? If the vitamin B1 is not in the gut,
that's right.
What happens to the Acidophilus?
It starves to death.
It starves to death. And so people who are under stress use up tremendous B complex, B vitamins, B1, and the Acidophilus goes. It has nothing to live on.
That's right.
So suppose that a person is taking, you know, say a good dose of that on a daily basis, and they've got a pretty good colony of the different lactobacillus. Okay, so let's suppose a person is taking this on a daily basis, and they've got a good colony of all the different, lactobacillus and so all the different bacteria in the gut. Are they also going to have colonies of those beneficial yeast in the gut? Will those remain? So would the presumption be that if you're taking this and you've got a good colony in there, are you going to be producing, or are these guys going to be producing enough B vitamins within your system that you might not have to take B vitamin supplements, or are you still going to need to take B vitamin supplements?
Well, that's a difficult one, but it's easy for me to answer because I'd say I wouldn't have any B vitamin supplements unless I absolutely knew that they were naturally occurring ones. The body doesn't recognise synthetic vitamins. The health department, this is a real thing for me too. The health department now says that, everybody's familiar with Kellogg's, with their added vitamin C and their added vitamin B in their products. Well, that's now against the law. They're not allowed to do that because the health department has scientifically proven the body does not recognise synthetic vitamins. But if you're a pharmaceutical company operating under the TGA, you can produce all these synthetic vitamins with the blessing of the government, saying, yes, go on and make them as fast as you can, because the government's probably getting 20 or 25% of their gross turnover, which is the license fee they put on the manufacture of these products. So in one government department they're saying it's against the law, and the other one's saying go for it, So but it is a fact. The other thing is that, as John and Anita are well aware of, because I was able to show them, I had a problem. I wanted to make this old Russian recipe. It was about 980 AD. It was from Vladimir I in Russia, and it was a fermented drink. It was made by the Don Cossacks, on the Don River Cossacks, and it was made using apples and fermented with lactobacillus. So I thought, I'll make this. So I'll do it the easy way. I won't peel the apples. I know what I'll do. I'll go and buy some organic apple juice. That'll be great, So that's what I did. And killed them. They were stone dead. I couldn't believe it. In 2 hours, I'd never had a lactobacillus left in the culture that I was trying to grow. So I thought, what is this? It must be the preservative they're using. They can't be using a preservative in organic apple juice, surely. So I rang the people up, and they told me, oh yes, we use ascorbic acid. And I said, you use what? And she said, we use ascorbic acid. That's vitamin C, And I said, oh, well, yeah, I know it's vitamin C, but it's a synthetic one, It's not the true one. And, well, I don't, that hasn't been proven. We put it in there because it's good for you. And I thought, well, there you go. That's how good it is if it kills the bacteria. The other thing I'd like to mention just briefly about that, a test I heard of that's going on through supermarkets with oranges. Because I've fermented oranges, and I don't have a problem with fermenting oranges at all. But there's no vitamin C in them. They're picking them too green. They're storing them for too long because it's only in the last 2 days of the ripening of the fruit where it gets the vitamin C. So for goodness sake, grow an orange tree in your backyard.
Okay, did you want to add anything more to that, Anita?
Yes, on the fact of the vitamin C, be careful because a lot of your products in the supermarket will have ascorbic acid in it. And when Alan told me this, I've been looking at more and more labels lately and finding that there's a lot of products, not only apple juice, but other things that have ascorbic acid, and this will be stripping you of your acidophilus. So check labels on that.
On this material here, on the no-bill fakery of Linus Pauling that you have in your handouts, I hope you all study that very, very carefully, because this was a revelation to me, and the story is in here on my own experience with ascorbic acid, which I used extensively for my patients because I believed what Linus Pauling had said about how good it is. It has now been proven that he has falsified all the reports that came out of the laboratory, which is named after him, the Pauling Laboratories. Now, we have found then in our work that the ascorbic acid, when taken internally, suppresses the healing in the body, and this is why all symptoms of healing, all healing crises end when ascorbic acid enters into the system. Now, we know that from the work of Alan Meyer that the ascorbic acid suppresses the growth of your bacteria, the acidophilus material in the system. And this is why the healing crisis stops, because the healing in the body stops the moment that you're on ascorbic acid. Everything is suppressed with your ascorbic acid just like a drug. And this is why we do not recommend under any circumstances any food that contains ascorbic acid or any, shall we say, medicines which contain ascorbic acid, any intravenous drip of ascorbic acid, any type of activity of ascorbic acid because of the destructive effect, the suppressive effect it has on the human body. Alan, I'd like your comments on that, sir.
Yes, and that's anything that kills my little friends is in trouble. What I've done, since I've made them resistant to ascorbic acid, which is a process I do. I've inoculated them against heat, and then the survivors of that I froze, and then the survivors from that I cultured and put them in chlorine, and then I've put them in salt, and I've put them in all sorts of things to try and cope with alcohol, and also to try and cope with our diets of today, the average person's diet. And nowhere did I ever think that the ascorbic acid would do the damage it does do. So I'm glad to say that they are now ascorbic acid resistant. I don't know whether it'll be resistant to 2 litres of apple juice, but certainly a couple of glasses of apple juice I've made them resistant to.
Lil has something she'd like to say.
I just have a question on calcium ascorbate and sodium ascorbate. Would that be equally as damaging to the acidophilus?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I've just filed that here. I'll go and find out for you.
This actually has the same effect because anything that's made in the laboratory will have and not by nature, will have a detrimental effect upon the human body.
Well, something I'd be really curious about then is, have you ever tested, with respect to its effect upon these different bacteria, the synthetic B vitamins? What will the synthetic B vitamins do to the acidophilus and the other bacteria?
They did nothing. I've tried that. They're fine, but they did nothing because I should have got growth from them, you see, and I didn't. It didn't help, but it didn't inhibit them either, no.
You will find that back during the time of Louis Pasteur, he did a lot of research with what they called a polarimeter, which has to do with polarized light. And he found that certain types of natural material would bend the light rays one way, while your synthetic material would bend the light rays another way. And so one is called dextrorotatory, which is turning it to the right, which is healthy for you, and the levorotatory, which is not healthy for you, turns it to the left. Nearly everything that is made synthetically, like for example, you'll find in your vitamin A, you'll find it'll say DL, where it is what they call a racemic mixture. Half of it will be dextrorotatory, half of it will be levorotatory, and this will be very harmful to the body. Most of your synthetic vitamins will be of a levorotatory nature. Your vitamin E will have that same racemic mixture here that's synthetically done, and this will be of harm to you. And so you have to be careful of your synthetic vitamin A and vitamin E, which they say that is absorbed into the body. It's absorbed into the tissues of the body and acts like a drug on the body because it is absorbed and suppresses the activity going on inside the body. It is not utilized by the body as a natural vitamin E or a natural vitamin A. And so we have to be careful about these things. All right? Now the vitamin B is neither levo nor dextro, because the vitamin B as made in the laboratory will approximate the vitamin B chemically, which is found in nature. And so it doesn't affect the polarized light one way or the other because it's not dextro or rotatory. So what we have to look at is when we take the vitamin B into our system, it will save our lives and do a certain amount of good because it's not dextrorotatory. It's not as synthetic as the dextrorotatory or the as the levorotatory is. The levorotatory would be synthetic. The dextrorotatory would normally be natural. But we still find that when people reach a certain point in their progression, the body manufactures the vitamin B in the gut with the acidophilus, and the person doesn't need the B vitamins because there is no deficiency of B vitamins. So using kinesiology, the B vitamins after a period of time will drop out like most other synthetic vitamins will drop out. But for most people to begin with, the B vitamins will be very strong because nearly everybody, because of the stressful lives that we live, we're B vitamin deficient. So I wanted to bring that out in reference to the subject that we're discussing. Doug?
So if I hear you correctly, the synthetic B vitamins are neither dextro nor levo?
That's correct, sir.
But the ascorbic acid would be levo?
The ascorbic acid is synthetic and still works on the body like a drug.
But it would be levo?
Your E's and A's would be levo and dextro. Your ascorbic acid is still the same chemical formula, but is only one of 22 forms of vitamin C that we need for a balance in the body. And if we take only one form of vitamin C in the ascorbic acid, then it throws the entire body out of balance.
Well,
and being a drug, it is suppressive to the body. The body cannot utilize it.
That makes a lot of sense with what I've seen in muscle testing over the years, because I've never found anybody that actually tested well with the vitamin C, with the ascorbic acid. And yet obviously some people will test okay on the synthetic Bs and others won't, depending upon their level of health. So that clears up some confusion in my mind. Thanks.
Again, with the vitamin C, or any vitamins, I mean, we get all these from our food. We eat all this good food. But the bacteria, that's one of the things the bacteria are famous for, is synthesizing your vitamin intake. They make sure it all happens. They make sure you get those vitamins. And you get that from out of your food, out of the range of foods that you eat.
I just thought of another question. So what would be the effect upon the bacteria within the gut of prolonged fasting? Would they all starve to death?
Yeah. Or they'd start, one thing about them is that if they haven't got anything to eat, they're going to be looking for something to eat. So it's not a bad idea to fast, not prolonged fasting, but, at least fast once a week, where you make sure that they translocate around your body, because they are the scrubbers and cleaners of the body. They clean your bowel, they get into your pancreas and your liver, and they trigger your immune killer cells. But the one thing that they do, well, it's not scientifically proven, but I was reading a paper on it the other day, that they can translocate into your lungs and clean your lungs as well. They are the most important bacteria to a woman because they keep her protected from infections or anything like that. And when your baby's born, that's where we get it from. We get it from our mother's birth canal, and the first milk establishes it in our gut. And then we have antibiotics, and then we take the pill, and then we do all these other things that kill it.
Question.
Alan, there's a lot of confusion about the best Acidophilus bacteria or Acidophilus, Lactobacillus acidophilus that you can get. I've been told, even here today, as you say, that is one of the best ones you can get. I've been told that the best one that you can get is the one that is made from, not from Bulgaricus acidophilus, because that particular one does not proliferate in your gut, that it dies. That the best one that you can get is actually a culture from breast milk, exactly what your point was towards the end. Does your Acidophilus multiply in the intestine, in the human intestine?
Of course, yeah. The other thing is, don't be mistaken with the Bulgaricus. Bulgaricus is Lactobacillus bulgaricus, same as it's Lactobacillus acidophilus. Any sort of the biggest test that you give to anything is and you can do it in your own home. They tell you they've got the best acidophilus in the world. Well, you say, okay, can it make me sauerkraut? Can I make sauerkraut with it? Can I make pickled vegetables with it? Can I make my own roll mops with it? Because if it's a live, active source, it'll do it. But it can't do it if it's not. You see, that's the first thing to remember.
Right. Would you address this Bulgaricus situation? Because I've heard conflicting opinions on this.
Yeah.
And would you address that situation, sir?
Okay. Lactobacillus bulgaricus is probably one of the only strains that likes milk. It's in here, but it's in very, very small numbers, because I don't feed it milk. There's no milk in this product. So it's there, and it just has to live. It's a fringe dweller at the moment. But if you were to introduce that to milk, well, then it'll take over, and it'll, as I said, use its antibiotics against all its friends, so it can ferment the milk. Now, in the medical journal, they came out and they were saying about taking too much yogurt because of Bulgaricus being the predominant bacteria in yogurt. It can take over your gut at the expense of Acidophilus and Lactus and Fermenti and Casei and all the others, because you're eating such huge amounts of yogurt. So that's why I make sure I have so many strains, different strains in here, because they all need each other. Yeah.
Yeah. The point is with Bulgaricus, it dies. To what I understand, I learnt that it dies the moment you stop taking the yogurt. If you stop it for 1-2 days, the Bulgaricus, because it's from cow's milk or sheep's milk or whatever, not human, it dies. Whereas this is what my reference to the first part was, that the best that I heard of was made from a culture of breast milk, human breast milk.
Yeah. Now, I can see what's happening to the Bulgaricus. It won't die. Of course, it'll deplete in huge numbers. It'll go down because there's no milk for it to ferment. Okay? Right. So it'll still be there in your gut, only very small, minute amounts. But the problem with it is it's leaving over all this lactic acid. It's leaving that behind. And it's also leaving a few enzymes behind as well. And so, which is detrimental to the others. So, yeah, that'll be why, I'd say. Yeah.
And what's your comment on the breast milk one from breast milk culture?
Well, so long as you know what the mother's been eating, yeah, it'd be fantastic. Yeah, yeah. Because that's how we get it originally. But it's still subjected to antibiotics and pills, you know, animal fat foods and alcohol, too much alcohol and all that, you know. Yeah.
And also the Acidophilus, Lactobacillus acidophilus, that's the friendly bacteria. Your comments on the bifidus, which is the one that's supposed to kill the Bacilli coli. Acidophilus, to what I understand, feeds the Bacilli coli, whereas the bifidus kills it.
Well, again, I only talk from experience, and I haven't sort of found that. I found that they all, you see, we need the coli. We need E. coli. I mean, we need that in our body. If we have a balanced flora in our gut, they're all kept under control. We even, believe it or not, we need candida. And you know that there's one candida, the names escape me because I was only reading about it the other day. There's one candida yeast that's now one of the best food yeasts. They're claiming it to be one of the best food yeasts that there is, even better than Saccharomyces cerevisiae. So, but Candida albicans, we need that. We've got to have that in our body. And what happens is once you deplete all the things that keep that in check and keep it in balance and just keep it's doing its little job, and it can take over, well then you have the problems, the sicknesses, and you know, and it comes back to, like anything, excess of anything is bad for us. Excess of albicans, Candida albicans, is destroying our immune system because our bodies can't cope with it.
Right. The other final question is refrigeration. Another point has been that you can buy Acidophilus in little bottles or in little capsules and so forth in the chemist shops, and it's been on the shelf. You don't know for how long it's been on the shelf. My understanding, it is a live bacteria. The Acidophilus, Lactobacillus acidophilus is a live bacteria, and at room temperature it destroys itself. It actually eats itself and destroys itself. So the hotter the temperature, the faster it destroys itself, so you must keep it refrigerated. Is that true or false? And with your product, your comment?
No, it's, I'll tell you what will kill it. It's not really false. The refrigerator, it should be kept in a cool, dark place, okay? Now the main thing about it is that they don't like fluctuating temperatures. That really does knock them. You know, like it's really cold now, it's hot tomorrow, and it's down, up and down. And that's what really kills them.
Alan?
Now the refrigerator's good because it keeps it all at one temperature.
Also, there's heat-resistant strains, which is the one I used to use, the Acidophilus, was heat-resistant. Would that be?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I've done. I've inoculated it because you're going to put it in your bag and you're going to fly to Melbourne with it, you know, and you've just been here and it leaves here and you're at the airport, it's 40 degrees, and then it's down in Melbourne, it's only, what, -5. Poor old Mexico, they get it, don't they? So, you know, that's why I've inoculated against all the things that I can.
What about the bifidus side? As I mentioned before, is there...
Well, the bifidus is more, in my mind, I watch it, you know, it's in there, but it's very, very, it's again small. It's more important for infants. They're doing studies on it in Japan now because in aging, old people, really old people, but they found that as soon as they introduced the bifidus, you know, it's only 4 or 5 hours later and along comes the Lactobacillus acidophilus, and he'd say, oops, here's bifidus. Oh, okay, here's my friend. I'm in there too. So, you know, to really try and split bifidus off and make all these wonderful claims about it is being unfair to it because, you know, it can't survive really on its own too well. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for your comments.
Thank you for the questions. Well, next question's coming up here, Alan. You made a statement, and I saw a few eyebrows go up. What is the recent literature in their teaching about the various strains of the Acidophilus that is used for, now you said this in part, but I want you to go into it, on that which will clean out the lungs, that which will clean out the heart, that which will clean out the kidneys, that which will clean out the liver. Could you make comments on the importance of the different strains of Acidophilus and what you have done in your research to incorporate that into this material here?
It's probably better to start right at the beginning, because it's something that you can all understand then. If you have a grape, and it's, you know, that grape is just hanging there waiting for somebody to come along and gobble it up, and you see that white furry stuff on the outside of the grape, you often see that. Well, that's yeast and lactobacillus sitting there waiting for that grape to drop the ground, okay? And then the yeast can, which is the stronger of the two and the fastest acting, can break through the skin, and the lactobacillus can then ferment the juice on the inside of that grape, so that then the seeds have all the nutrients they need to regrow. Now, a bird comes along and picks that grape. So, the bird, it goes into the crop. What happens, the Acidophilus and the lactobacillus, they all then attach themselves to the crop of the bird, inside the bird. So that then the bird benefits from that. And then when it sits under a tree and does its little poop, boom, up come the seeds, the grape seeds come out. It doesn't grind up the seeds, it eats the flesh. And so that's it in nature. And all I've done, you know, I've studied all the races that have longevity, and all of them live on fermented foods, even the Japanese, with their miso and tofu and things. Well, tofu is made synthetically now, but in the old days it was always fermented using lactobacillus. But all these people with longevity, the Georgians, the Hunzas, everybody, they live on fermented foods, and a lot of them use on products like this. So all I've done is copied nature, how I found them exactly in nature, how they perform together, and how they interrelate to each other. And that's why I said I had to go and find a yeast, because I could not get the Acidophilus to survive. It was driving me nuts. I could get all the others there, but the Acidophilus wouldn't hang in, but it needed that growth factor. So it's, what does that tell you? That tells you that it's hand in hand with the yeast. You can't live without it. So then it's got to be in there. So that's why I put it in there.
We have some people also concerned about the Candida issue. We have had some of the people who have used this and swear by it. They claim, this is what they claim, that it will clear up every condition that they have found of Candida. Now, I'm not going to say anything's going to cure anything here, but I'm saying they said this. What has been your findings on this, sir?
Yes, well, you know, as I was explaining before about Saccharomyces boulardii, it's a yeast that, it's an acid-resistant yeast, and it will kill Candida. The bacteria will kill Candida, because they kill the Candida not by using their antibiotics on it, they kill it because the Candida cannot live below a certain pH. And so all the jobs that the Candida yeast has taken over because you have just destroyed your gut flora by taking antibiotics, the Candida's having a field day. And then once it's hit with some lactic acid, well then of course it dies, it kills it off. And then the Saccharomyces boulardii will take up the job or the role that it is supposed to do. Also, Saccharomyces boulardii has been used now by the World Health Organization in third world countries for dysentery and gastroenteritis in children.
Doug, you had something? Okay. Go ahead, sir.
I have a question. Actually, I have three of them. First one is you mentioned it cleaned up the lungs. Okay. It cleaned up the lungs. What were you talking about? Things like asthma or things like that?
Well, no, let me qualify that. There's a lot of research going into that now. It hasn't been proven scientifically that it's thought they do actually clean the lungs. Now that'll be, and in my experience, I say yes they do because I'm with them all the time and I know my lungs. I get them checked and you know they're absolutely the best set of lungs you could ever find.
The second question, if say a young person was on the pill or something, what sort of dose of Acidophilus would you have to take to counteract the pill killing it?
Yeah, well, only if if somebody's on the pill, for instance, they shouldn't be. But if somebody's on the pill, they should take it at a regular time, right? Either when they first get up in the morning or something like that, to make sure they take the pill at a certain time, and then have the Acidophilus afterwards. You can have, you see, there's no recommended doses. You can't have too much of this product. You can sit there and drink 6 or 8 litres in a day if you want to. There's no such thing as too much. Too little is what your body passes out of your system every day, is around about 50 to 100 mils. So you need to be replacing that just to maintain your gut flora. So, you know, as I say, if I was on the pill, yeah, I'd be having a good glass a day. Yeah.
That was the next question. What is the dose?
Well, being a food, that's another thing. We can't recommend doses.
Oh, okay. It's a food, a glass.
Yeah.
That's a drink. Thank you.
It's against the law for me to do it, yeah.
Thank you.
What you have to consider too, lactobacillus in the old days, pre-chemicals, was on everything living. And so the foods we're consuming every day in our diet had lactobacillus. So taking a pill or a capsule or a teaspoon isn't anywhere near the normal amount the body needs, right? It's a food. Its very first job is to break down the foods that you put in your system to get the energy from, right? So always remember, one pill is no comparison to compared where lactobacillus should be in our foodstuffs.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like to add is that we do have recipes so that you can make your own sauerkraut and yogurt if you want to, but make your yogurt out of soy milk. Makes really nice yogurt out of soy milk. And just get onto a fermented food diet because it's going to save us in the end, you know. I mean, look at the Georgians. If they have oh, absolutely. You wouldn't believe what they eat. And there's a time in a month where they ferment their old bread and just drink that for a month, which is about midsummer when they can't get enough, you know, nothing's ripe in the garden, and you know, and the rye grains are still, you know, just heading in the paddock, and there's nothing for them to eat. They ferment old bread, and they drink the juice from it. They ferment it using lactobacillus, and that's all they have sometimes for a month or 6 weeks. And these people live to 100 years of age and older. You know, riding horses and playing polo and all these sorts of things at 100 years of age, working out in the fields. Women still menstruating at 83 years of age. It's incredible, you know. And when you look at all the things that they have and you think, wow, how do they survive on such, you know, on so little? And then when you see that everything is based on fermentation. They don't have any refrigerators. Lactic acid is a natural preservative. So there was only one way they can store their food, and that's to ferment it. And that's how they do it, you know.
Alan, if you're drinking a bottle of Grainfields in a few days, is it okay to leave it out of the fridge all the time? And how long would it take to become no good?
Well, the main thing, the main reason it's surviving in here because it's so full of carbon dioxide. Okay, and which is naturally produced. They produce that themselves. The yeast produce it, and some of the fermenti produces it. So what you have is an anaerobic situation here, and they're just sitting there waiting to get started somewhere, you know. And as soon as you open the bottle, because out comes the gas, in comes the air, you know, nothing to eat, so they'll even get into each other. And what'll happen is the top of the bottle will start to scum, and it looks not very nice, and it might taste a little bit stale. So, yeah, that's why I recommend that you always put it in the refrigerator. Refrigerate after opening. The other point is that you can take it down, and if you can pour it quickly enough, and you can keep as much gas in that bottle as you can, and then, you know, when you close the lid and give it a good shake, you can get up to a week or even 2 weeks without refrigeration. You understand what I'm saying? It's always probably better, you know, to buy a smaller bottle. I mean, the 2-litre bottle is a big bottle. We did that so to try and bring, you know, the costs down. But a 1-litre bottle, you know, it's not a problem. You should get a good week out of that. If you do, as I was saying, you know, just get the top of it on as quick as you can and give it a good shake so that, you know, they can gas themselves up again, and they'll keep themselves protected because you're using the carbon dioxide as a protection.
On the program, we're advised not to have hot or cold drinks. So if you took a glass out of the refrigerator and let it stand until it was room temperature, would you still be getting the same benefit in terms of the content?
Yes, yes, yes. The other thing is too, you can, with that powder, with the whole grain powder, you can mix the two together, and that's really the ideal situation. But we'll go into that later on. I think John's going to bring up the subject of proteins later.
I'd like to just ask you a question. Alan, now you said that on the grapes, this is something new to me, that there's Acidophilus on the grapes if you pick it right from the vine, or however the grapes grow. I'm not a farmer. But anyway, would this be true of other fruits and vegetables that are unsprayed?
Yes, good grass, good lush grass, lettuces, cabbages especially. They're on all these things, but as soon as they're sprayed or they're stored incorrectly and washed, or like apples are waxed and oranges are waxed, so we lose that. Yeah, we lose the...
Right, so this to me would point to a further advantage of buying organic foods, and then we shouldn't wash them when we get them home.
No, well, if you do, they're pretty tardy little fellas. If you do, only lukewarm water and only a light rub by the hand, and just keep them there because they'll hang in there, but they won't take poisons, you know, or chlorines or things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chlorine water would definitely kill them, though.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The other thing I'd like to ask you is, normally when a person goes on a candida diet, they have a die-off situation with the candida where the symptoms actually get worse before they get better. Does this happen with the grain fields?
Yeah, and some people it does. We found that. A lot of people get instant relief. I mean, I've seen Kath at a show. Kath, you can say, she does it. I can't talk about these things.
For thrush, you'll get instant relief using it as a douche, right? A lady that worked in one of the shows, you know, she could hardly walk. She had thrush so bad, and so she went and douched with it, and had instant success.
Okay, do you want to just tell us about your bowel?
This always comes up. I had a hysterectomy about 3 years ago, and they cut my bowel by mistake and distended. And the surgeon wasn't concerned about the damage he'd done to me, but more about the condition of my bowel. He said, it's like a 20-year-old. It's pink, clean and healthy. What do you attribute it to? I told him about what we do, the Lactobacillus, and he said, it's amazing. And I said, well, recommend it to all people that you cut their bowels.
You didn't say his answer to that.
Oh, he told me that he wasn't interested in this because he's in the business of sick people, not well people.
Okay, I'd like to have another little statement made here by Alan concerning horses. You had a horse, if you recall, that injured itself quite badly. And how fast did it heal when you put this material on that? Would you like to talk about that for a moment?
Okay, I don't know. Anybody here who understands proud flesh on a horse? Yeah. Well, you know, and it can be, you know what it can be. Really stiff. You know, if it's in a bad place and you get proud flesh, it's where the flesh through bad bacteria explodes back out, and they can never heal properly. If it's in a bad part on a joint, the horse can't fully use its leg. And vets have all these remedies for it. What happened was that this old mare, she's 30 years old, and it was my experimental mare because she had everything, this thing. She looks like about a 10-year-old horse. And she's a bit older than 30 now, isn't she? 32 or 33. She got hooked in a barbed wire fence and put about a good 12-inch V slice up in right in the joint of the joint of the back leg. So there was about a 6 or 8 inch flap of skin hanging down. So I cut that off because I couldn't see where it could do any good. I cut that off, and then I soaked the bandages in this because I know that's all I had. I didn't have anything else. So I soaked the bandages in it because I know no bad bacteria can live where they are, and it self-sterilises anyway. So I thought, well, that couldn't use anything better. Soaked the bandages in it, wrapped it all around the leg, and I changed the dressing every day, and that healed up. You can see on the mare now, looks like somebody's got a thick, like a carpenter's pencil, you know, but held it sideways, not that way, and just drawn a line up her leg, like that, big, just completely healed with absolutely no proud flesh at all. Yeah.